Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you here. Welcome back to the Kesher site org Derech Hashem extravaganza that we're doing. Today we're going to be doing section 1, chapter 3, and we're about to start point 5. What are we going to do today? We're going to talk about mankind's differences before and after Adam did his first sin, the ramification of that, and what that means for us, practically. Okay, that's today's material, So what did we do last time? We discussed the fact that the concept of earning and the concept of reward are different from the Jewish perspective. Earning is where you earn the rights to be able to get the reward that God has set aside for you. The reward that God has set aside is completely bespoke to you. It's not you. It's not like, oh, you enter a stadium and you get it, or you got there. It's an afterlife reward. It's not like that at all. It's the reward of closeness to God, totally commensurate and bespoke, custom built for the effort that you put in based upon what it is you did. Sometimes you may have done something which was really, really hard, and therefore you've earned a much greater reward. You can't get the reward in this world. It is impossible, because there's evil in this world, as we discussed. And evil is locked out of the next world for two separate reasons. Number one, that there's a mechitza problem. Evil is the stuff that God has made to be a barrier between you and him. And he can't reveal himself while that evil's still there. That's something he himself has designed. And number two, if he would allow evil in, it would ruin the reward of the righteous. Because the righteous would not feel comfortable being like having neighbours of people that were wicked. That it would ruin their reward. And God can't do that because he's got to give a perfect giving. So there's those two reasons double lock evil out of Olam Haba, out of the world to come. Olam Haba, remember, is this world rebuilt with the evil removed. It has to be physical, it has to be spiritual. We are physical and spiritual. We have physical bodies and spiritual souls. We're doing mitzvahs, we're fulfilling the commandments with our physical body and spiritual souls. It makes sense that we get paid both physically and spiritually in the same way that we did it. And if we would only get paid spiritually, like in Christianity, like you're walking around like a white robe and sandals and playing a harp with a halo. Nonsense. Nonsense. Why? It's not for reward. Why? If I only repay the soul, the body has a claim to say, it's all very well you pay the soul, but it was me that had to cash the check. If you wanted me to eat a certain food or not eat a certain food, to do a particular act or to refrain from a particular act, it was me that did it. Jewish males over the age of 13, have to, by law, put on phylacteries in the morning, which are called tefillin, or prayer boxes. They're like black boxes with scripture that's been written on parchment, loaded inside of these leather boxes. It's a mitzvah, it's a commandment, midoraisa, scripturally. The Jews have to fulfill this if they're male and over the age of majority, i.e. over the age of 13 in their Hebrew birthday. So from the 13th Hebrew birthday, you're obligated to put on tefillin every day of your life, except for Shabbos and Yom Tov, except for the Sabbath and for festivals. Okay? Now, if you say spiritually, I want to do this because I want to comply with the putting on of tefillin, with the putting on of phylacteries, then you're going to need an arm and you're going to need a skull to do that. Your body is saying, well, I didn't particularly want to do this, but if you want me to do this, I'll do it. And you can bind on your tefillin onto, and do that. I'll do that for you. Or if a woman wants to take challah, she wants to take a portion that was given to the priests out of a big bowl of dough that she's making, so baked goods, her hand is the one that has to pull that challah from the dough, right? So the hand was involved. And the hand can say, excuse me, it's all very well you wanted to do it. I actually did it. So the reward that God has to give has to be part spiritual, the desire that you had to fulfill the command, and part physical, because you did the actual mitzvah, you did the commandment with your body. In fact, think of any mitzvah, think of any commandment out of the 613 in the Torah, they've all got a physical component. God never tells us to directly interface with spirituality. He only tells us to directly interface with physicality, because there's no difference. The spirituality is behind the physicality for us. Buddhists might say, in order to be able to tune into the physical, you have to, the spiritual, you have to remove or divest yourself of physicality, which gets in the way, and remove yourself from physical trouble. Jains certainly say that. In fact, they'll even strip off their clothing, because the feel of the clothing against the flesh is already an entrapment into physicality. We say just the opposite. There is no path to God without the utilization of physicality, because that's how I made the system. And whenever you move around something physical, it's automatically tapped into something spiritual, because it's only there because of the spirituality that's behind it. The spirituality is like the source code, while the physicality is the atoms and the matter that actually make that into a physicality that we interface with. It doesn't really matter whether or not you're tapping an email utilizing keys on a computer. That will still be changing ones and zeros inside some kind of CPU somewhere. So it doesn't matter. As long as you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing. It doesn't matter whether you're interfacing directly with spirituality or physics. We happen to be physical creatures, so interface with that. So we have to do physical things. So the reward has to be physical and spiritual, because the acts were physical and spiritual. And it's got to be commensurate. If you do something more physically, the reward he has to give you is a physical pleasure that's higher than the spiritual pleasure. If you do something more spiritually, then he has to give a high spiritual, and it's totally down to you. Two people may do the same deed in different ways. So he has to reward you totally unique to you. Only he can keep track of that. All your thoughts, all your strategies, what you were thinking about, how you did it, the speech that you did at the time, everything, your emotions, all has to be kept track of on a huge upload of databases that he's got for every human that's ever lived. And he's organizing a perfect outcome of his revelation to that person based entirely upon their deeds, or lack thereof. Yeah? Okay. So, with that in mind, it's the only time in the whole book that I do this. I'm going to swap the 2 points around. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5. Okay? So I'm going to jump to page 49, section 1, chapter 3.6. And after I've done point 6, I'm going to go back to point 5. Okay? So point 6. This is point 6 now. When Adam was first created, he was precisely in the state that we've discussed until now. Two equal component opposites. Body, Yetzer Hara. Neshama, soul, Yetzer HaTov, inclination to the good. And he was absolutely parav. He was neutral. He has not made any decision and is not coloured or tainted by any decision so far. His environment contained both good and evil, and he was balanced between the two to choose whichever he wished. Now, what was the good and evil that he had in that environment? This is really interesting. Most people think that the evil was the snake. Well, it wasn't. The snake was not evil. The snake was used to tempt humanity, but that wasn't the evil itself. What actually was the evil? The evil and the good are as follows. What was definitely good? Let's make it easier. The definite good was God's command not to eat of the Eitz Hadas Taivara, not to eat of the tree, the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That was it. And God said that. You can't get better than that. Nothing is intrinsically good. Nature and the beauty and the waterfalls and all the things that was in Gan Eden, none of that's good. That's just backdrop. All that is backdrop. The good is God gave a command. He says, you see all the trees? Yes. That one, I don't want you to eat from. That's good. That's a tzivui. It's a command from your general, your master in chief, that's saying, look, yeah, I want you to eat anything you want, but not that. So essentially it's what we would call, modern Jews would call kashrus. It was a level of what's kosher, what food is fitting and prepared for eating. That particular food was non-kosher. It was treif. It was not edible. It was to be prescribed and set against. That definitely is the good. What was the bad? When the snake said, if you eat of it, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. That is an outright lie. What we call motzi shem ra, dispatching an evil report or name against someone or something they didn't do. God doesn't know good and evil. God knows truth and falsehood. Good and evil are human concepts which change through your life. When you were 6, what was good? Sweets, going to a theme park. Is that what you thought was cool at 16? What about when you're 26? What about when you're 36? What about when you're 46? These things, good and evil, are goalposts set by man's ambitions as he goes through life. Good and evil shift. Truth and falsehood are absolutes. 2 + 2 is 4 doesn't change when you're 60. It's just an abstract truth. It's just the way it is. God is functioning on emes and sheker, not taiv and ra. The Nachash said to Chava, that her name was Isha, woman at that stage. Adam renamed her Chava once she sinned. The Nachash said to Isha, which means from man, Isha means from man. She was half of his body. He was created male and female back to back, and then he was split apart, flesh and bone together, which is why on the back there's the dip over the spine, says the Zohar, which is the operation scar. The dip of the spine is the operation scar from the operation, and that's why also you get the spinous process. See, some of the spine, the actual vertebrae, come out, going to the back. That's because they were literally peeled apart from Adam and made Isha. Why God would make them together if he knew he was going to split them apart later is a fascinating question, which we're not going to do for now. There's a reason behind that. But he split them apart, and she went off and listened to what the snake had to say, and she took on board what the snake said and said, yeah, very nobly, I want to be more like God, I want to know good and evil, and I'll go do it. And she came back and then seduced or impressed upon her husband to be able to have some of this and share and partake of this with her. She'd already done this by this stage. Notice the snake never interfaced with Adam directly. And Adam was the cause of it. Had she have done it and he said no, and she'd have died, he'd have been fine. He'd have been reset up with another mate and he'd have continued. The protocol was that Adam can't eat of it. Now, Chava or Isha did eat of it. She would have died. Had Adam have said, well, I ain't touching that with a disinfected barge pole, he would have passed his test and be allotted a new mate. As it was, because he did eat of it, he's failed and the entire system falls down. That's the way God created it. Notice when Adam was created, female and male, back to back, he still called it Adam. This dual creature, this dual gender creature, male and female, which had all elements of masculine and femininity in it, was still called Adam. The primary concept from God's perspective was Adam. That's what he took it from the earth, he molded it and he animated it, with the components of femininity within it as well at that time, before he separated her out of him. The appropriate thing for him to have done would have been to have chosen the good, to comply with the command not to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That would be what we're hoping for here. Had he have done so, his soul would have overcome his body. That means the body is lusting after the taste of this fruit. The soul says, not now. Not now. We can't do it now because God said no. He was created I'm going off. He was created Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon. On Shabbos day, our sages teach us, he would have given him the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad to make Kiddush, sacrament, over. He would have actually had a cup of wine, and some say it was actually grape juice that he sinned with, or wine, and he would have had that for Kiddush. How long before Shabbos came in did he eat of it? Answer, just 3 hours before Shabbos came in. 3 earth hours. Out of the 24-hour system we have today, it was 3 hours before Shabbos came in. So let's say Shabbos comes in at, 7. So he had at 4. What do? Hashem says, because you couldn't wait 3 hours to eat of the Eitz Tov, I will now make a rule that you cannot eat any fruit trees, their yield for 3 years, known as orla. That means if you plant a fruit tree and it has cherries on it, let's say, you have to wait for 3 entire seasons, 3 years to go by, before you can start picking that fruit off. That's called orla, the scriptural prohibition of orla. And that's specifically to counter the impatience Adam had 3 hours prior to Shabbos when he ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Had he not have eaten it, his soul would have overcome his body. I want to taste that fruit. Well, wait. That means the soul would have elevated the body, causing reward for them both. The soul gets its job done, which is to comply with God's decree. The body gets its job done, which is to be purified or enlightened or pushed up by a soul, not just an animal, not just an ape anymore. Otherwise, it's just an ape. And then it says, "Wow, I'm in the service." So tigers don't have this, ducks don't have this, only humans have this. And then the whole system, the matrix together of human soul and human body, gets elevated, and then God justifiably gives of his good to another, to Adam, and that's it. That's the whole system, no more needed. That's all he needs. Listen to this. Key point. One God gave one choice to one man once on one day with one item to enter one world. That's the hallmark of the Creator. Of course it went like that. Of course that's how he designed it. All unified. It's man that turned around and said, you know what, I'd prefer to do it a different way. Let me do it my way. I was like, all right, if you're going to do it your way, you're going to make it much more complicated. Much more complicated. Had he have done it, he would have immediately attained perfection and it would have remained with him forever. He'd He'd have entered Olam Haba alive. He was immortal, created immortal. Indeed, cell death, apoptosis, is put in by a certain series of codons genetically to tell cells to die in a very meticulous way. God says, the day you eat of the Eitz Das Tov Ra, it will cause you death. You're an immortal being. I will change genetic structure of humanity, and I'll put in apoptotic genetic material to tell you to die. And I don't want to do that. If you're immortal, the greatest thing you could lose is life. That's your greatest commodity for sure. Becoming mortal from being immortal is the worst outcome. So he says, that's it. You're now becoming mortal. I told you not to do this. It's changed. It's poisoned your genetic code. Let's go back to point 5. We've just done point 6. Jump back to point 5 on page 49. This is a watershed moment now. Among the things that one must realize is the fact that man has now been radically altered. As a result of Adam's sin, a great change took place, transforming both man and his world to a large degree. Why on earth would the world have to change just because Adam sinned? That doesn't make sense. Let Adam change. Why should the fish change? Indeed, the Medrash Rabbah says that after Isha gave Adam to eat of the Eitz Das Tov Ra, she gave every single animal in the world a bit of it. There's one animal called a chol, which is a bird that refused. But every other animal said, okay, only too happy to do it. What is the meaning of this bizarre medrash? Why would she feed it to anyone else? Answers like this. The world, we've already said on page 39, section 1, chapter 2, end of point 1. The purpose of all that was created was to bring into existence a creature who could derive pleasure from God's own good in a way that would be possible for it. It's a major point, cross-referencing page 53, page 281, page 91, page 253. It's a theme that runs through the whole book. Everything in the world is only a backdrop for the... Do you remember the blue-orange? The room and the table, it's all there for the blue-orange. If man has now sullied himself and gone down an operating level, the world around him is holding too high to be useful. The animals were happy to drink of the Eitz Das Tov Ra because at least now they have a use. If they're all backdrop for this creature and they understand, or their spiritual roots understand that, then they realize my purpose here is to make a web, is to make a biosphere, a background, an establishing zone for humanity to flourish so that they can fulfill their function of doing what it is God wants for them. If I can't do that anymore because I'm too high and man has become too lowly through his own decision, I'm now useless. So the animals willfully ate of it. That's what it means, transforming both man and his world. The very world around him now became mixed with evil. Engine wear, things that break down, is all only post-Adam. When Adam wanted to eat bread, bread grew hot right off of the wheat stalk. It was right there. It's a bun, just pull it off and eat it. A hot bun. That's how it grew, off the wheat. What do we have to do now? We have to take seeds, plough the ground, chuck the seeds in the ground, wait for them to grow, cut them, thresh them, winnow them, grind them, sort them, sift them, knead them, bake them, and then finally eat them. What's going on with all these stages? Answer, that's what evil does. Even remember, acts as a mechitza, as a barrier. The more evil you bring in, inculcate into the system, the more distanced the whole thing is. Do you see that? It's distanced. Evil distances you from the Creator. It's a very important idea. Well, now that you brought evil into the world, instead of just having hot buns growing off of wheat stalks, Hatzlacha Rabbah, you want a distance from me, then there's the distance. Go plant more and sow it yourself and go through the whole process of bread manufacture, if that's what you want. There was no need to have that barrier. It was useless for Adam to have it like that. If he wanted bread, he had bread. Because that wasn't his task. His task was to obey a directive against his desire, against his lusts. His lust was, eat it. And his task was, not now. God has said no. For reasons that I don't need to understand why. Am I willing to sublimate my ego to God? That's the question. If the answer is no, then your ego wins. If the answer is yes, then your ego is overcome by your desire to sublimate to something bigger and better than you. Very difficult thing for humans to do that. So it transformed man and his world to a large degree, entailing many things and having numerous effects worldwide. When we speak of man and his environment, we must therefore distinguish between his state before the sin and his state afterwards, because everything has to change to recalibrate man to a new level of lower free will. The free will he enjoyed in the Garden of Eden is not the free will we enjoy today. And we're also products of sin. We're products of negative decisions which skew us and make us more physical towards more physical desires anyway. Let's now go to point 7. So we've done 4, 6, 5, now we're going to 7. It's the only time in the whole Sefer we do that switcheroo for 5 and 6. Bottom of page 49 if you've got a text. We are normally aware of the soul's existence only because it provides us with life and the ability to think. It's necessary to realise, however, that the soul also has another function, and you should highlight or underline this if you have a copy of the text. To purify man's physical body. That's an underlined moment. Gradually elevating it, the body, until it, the soul too, can take pleasure from perfection along with the soul. I'll do that again. I think I may have said that wrong. To purify man's physical body, gradually elevating it, the body, until it, the body, can also take pleasure from perfection along with the soul. How does a soul purify a body? Answer, by getting it to do tasks on its behalf which are in line with what God wants it to do. The soul will be told, do not eat on the Day of Atonement. Fast on the day of Yom Kippur. So the body's like, I'm really hungry, pretty thirsty. If I go into the back kitchen at the back of the synagogue, nobody will know. There's no one here. I'll just have a glass of water. Maybe I'll nick a biscuit. Nobody will know. A quick cup of coffee. I like coffee. And the soul's like, no, today is a Day of Atonement. You can't do that today. This is the one you have to fast day. The body's like, it doesn't matter. Nobody will know, and I'm tired and I'm hungry. Why do I have to do this? If the body is sublimated to the soul, then the body is now doing something in true spirituality. It's following the soul saying, I will control myself and sublimate my natural desires for a higher moral ethic, which God himself is the only arbiter of. If the body wins out and the soul is like, oh no, don't do it. And the body's like, nice cup of coffee, Nescafe Gold, yum, you know what I'm saying? Nice whole milk and lots of sugar, yeah? Or you could even use full fat cream, and then drink it. It's on Yom Kippur. It's like the soul is, what are you doing? You're not allowed to do this. Like, you know what I'm doing? I'm enjoying myself. The world is for my enjoyment. I'm doing it. I know God may have said, don't eat today. But that means the soul is losing it. It didn't fulfill its function, which is purify our body. And it, the soul, gets sullied because it's failed in its task. And the body gets sullied because it didn't allow itself to be purified by the soul. So it's a big stakes game. You're playing for the stake of the soul and the body in every decision you're making, to varying degrees, depending upon what it is you're fighting for, as it were. So that's really absolutely key here. The body gets to elevate itself via sublimating it to the soul, and the soul elevates itself by getting a body to do its job, because then it fulfills its purpose. By fulfilling its purpose, it perfects itself. Everything that does its purpose perfects itself. Anything you find physically or spiritually that isn't fulfilling its purpose is actually being degraded. If you have a machine which makes sausages and you try to get it to make ice cream or something else, it's not fulfilling its ultimate purpose. It's designed as a sausage maker. So make sausage. If it just sits there, not doing anything and rusts, it's a liability, not an asset to the company that owns it. Your life you'll only feel fulfilled in your life if you do what you're meant to do with it. You can look around for all kinds of things. I'm going to go paragliding and scuba diving. I'm going to become a jet ski instructor. I'll just, I won't, you can do those for fun on holiday. But if you make that your life, instead of doing what it is God may have said to you, let's say that isn't your life. Let's say God didn't want you to be a jet ski instructor. He wanted you to do something else in another country entirely. You will never feel fulfilled by doing that. You'll be conning yourself every day. You need to find out what it is you need to do and do it. Don't shy away from it. Don't be scared. Live up to that. You can still go paragliding and skiing and things. That's all for recreation. That's fantastic. If you say, I'm going to run away from my task and I'm going to do things which are not in my prime directive, but it's close, it's good enough, it checks the box for my guilt issues, you'll never feel fulfilled. The light smattering of fulfillment will just be a titillation, which will in no way be a deep feeling of solid contentment. You'll never get it, because that's the system. If Adam had not sinned, he would have been able to attain this total perfection, his soul purifying his body step by step, until he, Adam, reached the level required to permanently partake of the everlasting bliss, which is closeness to God. We've learnt today quite a bit. Number one is that the role of a soul is to purify the body. We'll discuss that next time. And the role of a body is to be purified or enlightened or elevated by sublimating itself to the soul. That doesn't mean it doesn't enjoy itself. There's lots it enjoys. It's a very enjoyable religion, Judaism. There's lots of wonderful things in it. It doesn't mean you're going to have a hard time. It just means that you're being directed by a will, with full volition, you know what you're doing, to do things which you wouldn't do unless you were directed like that, like the keeping of the Sabbath and avoiding foods which are non-kosher, right? That is not something which I would do unless I was commanded to do it. I certainly wouldn't put on tefillin in the morning if I wasn't commanded to do it. But I'm doing it in the fulfillment of those commands, right? That's a very important point. Two is that the nature of humanity and the environment we live in has gone through a profound relegation after Adam's sin in order to recalibrate free will for the lower level creature. We had a creature who was up here, now he's dropped down there. The environment he's in has to drop down to be commensurate to him, otherwise he won't have a proper challenge, he won't be properly rewardable, won't be properly justifiable, the whole thing falls to bits. Everything has to be perfectly justifiable. God's get it perfect. He has to be perfect. He can't mess up. Put all that together, and you've got everything we need to start talking about what mankind did now after the sin, and why now, this is what we'll discuss next time, our workload is doubled. Think back to how Adam ate bread, and now how we have to eat bread. We got a lot more to do to get the same things done. It's much harder for us. We've inherited that as an outcome of his decision. It's perfectly fair, by the way. If your grandfather wants to give you an inheritance of a large manor, you don't feel uncomfortable about that. It's his choice. If he wants to inherit you with good things or bad things, that's just how things are. If your grandfather was full of debt and then he died and leaving you're the name of the executor on the will, the people who want the money come and knocking on your door. It's not fair. I didn't run up the thing. Yeah, that's how things work. We are always paying the price for our parents' decisions. That's how things work in the world, right? So we'll discuss now what this means for us next time. Thank you so much. I look forward to you joining us then. And thanks for being here. Any questions or comments, leave them below.